In the small coastal town of Seabreeze Bay, life was simple. The salty breeze carried the scent of the ocean, and people lived at a slower pace compared to big cities. It wasn't a place where flashy cars or expensive clothes mattered. Instead, kindness and community were what kept everyone connected. At the heart of this little town stood the Seabreeze Diner, a cozy spot known for its warm atmosphere and delicious food. Emily Carter worked there as a waitress. She was in her late 20s with curly brown hair tied back into a neat ponytail and always wore a bright smile that could light up even the gloomiest days. Her job wasn't easy. Long hours on her feet dealing with cranky customers and earning just enough to get by. But she loved it because it allowed her to meet all kinds of people. Emily had a way of making strangers feel like old friends. Whether it was cracking jokes with the locals or offering comforting words to someone having a bad day, she made sure no one left the diner feeling unnoticed. What most people didn't know about Emily was that behind her cheerful demeanor lay a tough reality. After losing both her parents in a car accident years ago, she became the sole caregiver for her younger brother, who was still in high school. Every penny she earned went toward keeping a roof over their heads and food on the table. One stormy evening, when rain hammered against the diner windows and lightning lit up the dark sky, the usual crowd of customers thinned out early. Most people preferred staying indoors during such weather. As Emily wiped down tables and straightened chairs, the door creaked open. A man stepped inside, shaking off the rain from his jacket. He looked tired, almost defeated, and his clothes were far from polished. There was something about him that stood out, not in a glamorous way, but in a quiet, unassuming manner. He glanced around hesitantly before choosing a corner booth near the window. Curious, Emily grabbed a menu and approached him with her signature smile. "Evening? Can I get you started with anything?" she asked brightly, trying to ignore the fatigue etched on his face. The man looked up, startled, as if he hadn't expected anyone to notice him. His eyes darted toward the menu in her hand, then back to her face. He hesitated, fumbling with the edges of his damp jacket. "Actually, I don't have much money right now." For a moment, silence hung between them. Emily studied him carefully. There was no arrogance or entitlement in his tone, only raw honesty. Something about the way he spoke tugged at her heartstrings. She'd seen plenty of folks come through the diner pretending to be broke just to score a free meal, but this man didn't strike her as one of them. "Don't worry about it," she said gently, placing the menu aside. "Let me bring you some coffee and toast. It's on the house tonight." Relief washed over his face, followed by a hint of embarrassment. "Thank you," he murmured softly. "I'll pay you back someday, I promise." Emily waved off his gratitude. "No need to promise anything. Everyone deserves a warm meal, especially on a night like this." As she turned to head back to the counter, she couldn't help but wonder about the stranger. Who was he? Why did he seem so lost? But she pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on preparing his order. When she returned with a steaming cup of coffee and a plate of buttered toast, she found him staring out the window, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. "Here you go," she said, setting the tray down. "Careful, the coffee's hot." He gave her a small, grateful smile. "Thanks again, you're really kind." "It's nothing," Emily replied, brushing off the compliment. "If you need anything else, just holler." Over the next hour, the diner remained mostly empty, save for the two of them. Occasionally, Emily would glance over at the man, noticing how slowly he sipped his coffee as though savoring every drop. It wasn't until closing time that she finally learned his name. As she tidied up the last few tables, he approached her, holding out a crumpled napkin. On it, he'd scribbled a single word: Alexander. "I figured I should introduce myself properly," he said sheepishly. "I'm Alex, thanks for everything tonight, I won't forget it." Emily smiled, taking the napkin. "Nice to officially meet you, Alex, and hey, don't mention it. We've all been there at some point, right?" Alex nodded, though his expression suggested otherwise. Little did Emily know this seemingly ordinary encounter would change both their lives forever. While Emily returned to her routine the following days, Alex began visiting the diner more frequently. Each time, he ordered the same thing: coffee, and toast, and always sat in the same corner booth. At first, their conversations were brief, limited to polite exchanges about the weather or the latest gossip in town. But gradually they grew longer and more personal. During one particularly slow afternoon, Alex opened up about his past. He told Emily about growing up poor, working multiple jobs to put himself through college, and eventually building a successful business empire from scratch. He spoke passionately about the thrill of creating something from nothing, but also about the loneliness that came with wealth. But none of that matters now, he admitted, his voice tinged with bitterness. I lost everything recently. My company, my reputation, even my family. I came here hoping to start over, away from all the chaos. Emily listened intently, her heart aching for him. Though she couldn't relate to his world of luxury, she understood pain and loss all too well. In return, she shared pieces of her own story. The sudden death of her parents, the responsibility of raising her brother, and the sacrifices she'd made along the way. Their talks became a safe space where neither felt judged, and both found solace in each other's company. Unbeknownst to Emily, Alex harbored a secret. Beneath his worn-out clothes and weary demeanor lay a fortune waiting to be reclaimed. Yet, for the first time in years, he didn't care about money or status. All that mattered was the genuine connection he'd formed with Emily, a woman who saw him not as a millionaire or a failure, but simply as a human being deserving of compassion. As the days turned into weeks, Alex became a regular at the Seabreeze Diner. He wasn't just another customer anymore. He was part of the rhythm of Emily's daily life. Every time he walked in, rain or shine, she'd greet him with her warm smile and a, "Hey there, stranger." It was their little inside joke now. Though Alex rarely ordered anything more than coffee and toast, his presence brought an unexpected comfort to Emily's otherwise hectic routine. At first glance, Alex didn't stand out among the diner's patrons. His clothes were still worn, his shoes scuffed, and his hair often unruly from running his fingers through it while lost in thought. To the other customers, he might have looked like any drifter passing through town, someone who had fallen on hard times and needed a place to rest for a while. But Emily saw something deeper. Beneath his quiet exterior lay a man carrying heavy burdens, someone trying to piece together the fragments of his shattered life. And somehow, over countless cups of coffee and late-night conversations, their bond grew stronger. One evening after the diner had emptied out and Emily was wiping down tables, Alex hesitated by the door before turning back toward her. "Mind if I help you clean up?" he asked awkwardly. "Feels wrong sitting here while you do all the work." Emily raised an eyebrow, amused. "Help? You sure about that? Cleaning isn't exactly glamorous." Alex shrugged, offering a small grin. "I've done worse. Besides, I owe you for all those free meals." She laughed softly but nodded. "All right then. Grab a mop. Let's see what you're made of." For the next hour, they worked side by side, sweeping floors, stacking chairs, and scrubbing countertops. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, it felt companionable, like two old friends sharing a quiet moment. As they cleaned, Alex surprised Emily by opening up even more about his past. He talked about the long nights spent building his business, the sacrifices he'd made along the way, and how success had changed him in ways he hadn't anticipated. "I used to think money would solve everything," he confessed, wringing out a damp cloth. "But the higher you climb, the lonelier it gets. People start seeing your wallet before they see you. And when things fell apart..." He paused, his voice dropping. "Well, let's just say loyalty is hard to find when you're no longer useful to anyone." Emily listened carefully, her heart aching for him. She couldn't imagine what it must feel like to lose everything, to go from commanding boardrooms to sitting alone in a diner booth, wondering where you went wrong. Yet, despite his struggles, Alex never came across as bitter or self-pitying. There was a quiet dignity in the way he carried himself, a determination to rebuild not just his life, but also his sense of self-worth. "You know," Emily said finally, breaking the silence, "losing stuff doesn't define us. It's what we do afterward that matters. Look at me. I lost my parents, and yeah, it nearly broke me. But I kept going because I had to. For my brother. For myself. You'll figure it out too, Alex. Just give yourself time. Her words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Alex stared at her for a moment, gratitude shining in his eyes. You're incredible, you know that? He said quietly. Most people wouldn't bother listening, let alone believing in someone like me. Emily waved off his compliment, though a blush crept onto her cheeks. Everyone deserves a second chance, even millionaires who pretend to be broke. They both chuckled at that, the tension easing slightly. But deep down, Alex knew she was right. In this tiny diner, surrounded by mismatched furniture and the faint smell of grease, he'd found something he hadn't realized he was searching for. Hope. Over the next few weeks, their friendship deepened. Alex began helping out more often, not just cleaning, but also fixing things around the diner. He noticed the loose hinge on the front door and tightened it. When the cash register jammed one afternoon, he patiently disassembled it and got it working again. Each act of kindness seemed small, but to Emily, they meant the world. "Where'd you learn to fix stuff like that?" she teased one day as he adjusted a wobbly table leg. "Don't tell me Millionaire's moonlight as handyman." Alex smirked, tapping the leg into place. "Let's just say I've had my fair share of DIY disasters. Turns out being broke teaches you how to MacGyver your way through life." Their banter became a constant source of joy for Emily. On tough days when the stress of juggling work and caring for her brother felt overwhelming, Alex's presence was a reminder that she wasn't alone. He listened without judgment, offered advice when asked, and always seemed to know when to crack a joke to lighten the mood. Slowly but surely he became someone she could rely on, a friend she trusted completely. But as much as Emily enjoyed their growing connection, she couldn't shake the feeling that Alex was holding something back. There were moments when he'd trail off mid-sentence, his gaze distant as if remembering something painful. Other times he'd avoid certain topics altogether, steering the conversation toward safer ground. Part of her wanted to press him for answers, to understand the full story behind the man who claimed to have lost everything. But another part, the bigger part, knew better than to push. Everyone had scars, visible or not, and Alex's wounds were still fresh. One rainy afternoon, as they sat together in the diner during a rare lull, Emily decided to broach the subject gently. "So, Alex," she began, stirring sugar into her tea, "what happens next for you? I mean, once you're ready to leave Seabreeze Bay?" He looked up, startled by the question. For a moment he seemed unsure how to respond. Then, with a sigh, he leaned back in his chair. "To be honest, I'm not sure. This place has been, well, it's been good for me. Better than I expected anyway. But eventually, I'll have to face reality, figure out how to pick up the pieces." Emily tilted her head, studying him. "And what does that look like?" "Picking up the pieces, I mean." Alex hesitated, his fingers drumming lightly against the tabletop. "It means proving I'm not the person everyone thinks I am. Clearing my name, getting back what was taken from me. But it also means deciding who I want to be moving forward. Because the truth is, I don't want to go back to the way things were. Not entirely." His words struck a chord with Emily. She understood the desire to reinvent oneself, to shed the weight of past mistakes and start anew. In many ways, she'd been doing the same thing ever since her parents' death. Building a future for herself, and her brother required letting go of the grief and guilt that threatened to hold her back. "I get that," she said softly. "Sometimes losing everything gives you a chance to build something better, something real." Alex smiled faintly, his expression softening. "Yeah, something real." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the rain streak down the diner windows. Outside, the world felt gray and dreary, but inside there was warmth, a flicker of hope kindled by shared understanding and mutual respect. Unbeknownst to Emily, Alex's decision to stay in Seabreeze Bay wasn't solely about escaping his troubles. It was about her. From the moment she'd handed him that cup of coffee on that stormy night, she'd reminded him of everything he'd forgotten in his pursuit of success: compassion, authenticity, and the simple joys of human connection. With Each passing day he found himself drawn to her in ways he couldn't fully explain. It wasn't just her kindness or resilience. It was the way she made him feel seen, valued, and alive again. Yet as much as he cared for her, Alex couldn't bring himself to confess his feelings. How could he, when he still had so much to prove, not just to the world but to himself? For now he settled for cherishing the moments they shared, knowing that every laugh, every conversation, and every glance brought him closer to the man he wanted to be. Little did either of them know, fate had plans of its own, plans that would test their bond, challenge their beliefs, and ultimately bring them closer than ever before. As the weeks rolled on, Alex's presence at the Seabreeze Diner became a comforting constant for Emily. He wasn't just a regular anymore. He was woven into the fabric of her daily life. They talked about everything under the sun, books they'd read, places they dreamed of visiting, and even silly childhood memories. Their conversations flowed naturally, like two streams merging into one river. Yet despite their growing closeness, there was still an unspoken distance between them. Emily sensed it, but couldn't quite put her finger on what Alex was hiding. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled outside the diner windows, Emily noticed something different about Alex. He seemed distracted, quieter than usual. Instead of his typical coffee and toast order, he sat at his booth with his hands clasped tightly around an empty mug. Concerned, she approached him with a fresh pot of coffee. "You okay?" she asked gently, pouring him a steaming cup. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders." Alex forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Just thinking," he said vaguely. "About stuff." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Stuff, huh? That sounds serious. You gonna share, or do I have to guess?" He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "It's nothing you need to worry about, really." But Emily wasn't convinced. She slid into the seat across from him, her apron crinkling as she leaned forward. "Listen, Alex, we've been through this before. You don't have to carry everything alone. Whatever it is, you can talk to me." For a moment, Alex hesitated. His gaze flickered toward the window, then back to her face. There was a vulnerability in his expression that made her heart ache. Finally, he sighed and leaned back in his chair. "All right," he said quietly, "but promise me you won't freak out." Emily crossed her arms playfully. "Freak out? Now you're really selling it. Just spill already." Alex took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "Remember when I told you I lost everything? My company, my reputation, all of it?" She nodded, her curiosity piqued. "Yeah, what about it?" "Well," he paused, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. "Turns out I might not be as broke as I thought." Emily blinked, unsure she'd heard him correctly. "Wait, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," Alex continued slowly, "that some people have been trying to track me down. Former business partners, lawyers. They claim they've uncovered evidence proving I was set up. If I go back and fight, I could get everything back. The money, the assets, the whole thing." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and loaded. Emily stared at him, her mind racing. This changed everything, or so it seemed. But instead of feeling shocked or impressed, she felt conflicted. Money had never mattered to her, not really. What mattered was the man sitting across from her, the one who helped clean the diner, who listened without judgment, who brought warmth to her chaotic days. Would this revelation change him? Would it change them? "So," she said, finally breaking the silence, "what happens now? Are you leaving?" Alex shook his head quickly. "Not yet. Not unless I have to. But I need to figure out what I want first. All this time I've been running from my old life, trying to escape it. And now suddenly it's chasing me again." Emily frowned, leaning closer. "And what do you want, Alex? Not what they want, or what the world expects of you, but what you want." Her question caught him off guard. It was deceptively simple, yet profoundly difficult to answer. For years, Alex had defined himself by his achievements, his wealth, his status, his success. Losing those things had stripped him bare, forcing him to confront who he truly was beneath the surface. And now, sitting here with Emily, he realized something startling. He didn't miss the money. He missed the simplicity of human connection, the joy of helping someone without expecting anything in return, the peace of being seen for who he was, flaws and all. "I want to stay," he admitted softly. "Here, with you, in this little corner of the world where none of that other stuff matters." His confession sent a shiver down Emily's spine. She hadn't expected him to say that. Not so openly, not so honestly. Part of her wanted to believe him, to trust that he meant every word, but another part, the cautious, realistic part, reminded her of the risks. People didn't just walk away from fortunes. Lives didn't reset that easily. "That's a big decision," she said carefully. "Are you sure you're ready to give up all that, to start over completely?" Alex smiled faintly, his eyes softening. "I think I already did. Coming here, meeting you, it's been the best thing that's happened to me in years. The rest, it's just noise." They sat in silence for a while, the hum of the diner fading into the background. Outside, the wind rustled the fallen leaves, scattering them across the pavement. Inside, the air felt charged with possibility. Over the next few days, Alex began preparing to leave Seabreeze Bay temporarily. Though he hated the idea of stepping away, even for a short time, he knew he had to confront his past before he could fully embrace his future. He didn't tell Emily the exact details of his plans. He didn't want to burden her, but he promised he'd be back as soon as possible. On his last night in town, the diner was unusually quiet. Most of the regulars had already left, leaving only a few stragglers nursing their drinks at the counter. Emily stood behind the register, counting receipts, while Alex lingered near the door, looking reluctant to leave. "You heading out soon?" she asked, glancing up. He nodded, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Yeah, early train tomorrow." Emily mustered a smile, though it wavered slightly. "Well, don't forget us little people when you're living it up in the big city again." Alex chuckled, but there was sadness in his eyes. "That's not going to happen, and you know it." Before she could respond, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "Just read it later, okay?" Confused, Emily accepted the note, tucking it into her apron pocket. "What's this?" "It's something I needed to say," Alex replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something I couldn't say out loud." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to stand still. Then with a final nod, Alex turned and walked out the door, disappearing into the cool night air. Later that evening, after closing up the diner, Emily sat alone at one of the booths, staring at the crumpled note in her hand. She hesitated for a moment, then unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was neat but shaky, as if written in haste. Her eyes scanned the words, each sentence hitting her like a wave. "Emily, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for me. You've given me more than food or shelter. You've reminded me of what truly matters. Your kindness has saved me in ways I can't explain. I wish I could stay longer, but I need to face my past before I can move forward. Please don't forget me, because I'll never forget you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she read the note again and again. She'd always known Alex was special, but this was something else entirely. Through his words, she saw the depth of his gratitude and the beginnings of something deeper, something neither of them had dared to name. Over the following weeks, Alex's absence weighed heavily on Emily. The diner felt emptier without him, the days longer and quieter. Yet despite the ache in her chest, she held on to his note, reading it whenever doubt crept in. It became a lifeline, a reminder that their story wasn't over. Not yet. Unbeknownst to Emily, Alex worked tirelessly to clear his name, driven by the memory of her unwavering belief in him. Every challenge he faced, every obstacle he overcame, brought him closer to the truth, and closer to the woman who had changed his life forever. Little did either of them know, fate had one more twist in store. A twist that would test their bond, redefine their dreams, and ultimately bring them together in ways neither could have imagined. Months passed since Alex had left Seabreeze Bay, and though Emily tried to keep herself busy, his absence lingered like a shadow over her days. The diner felt quieter without him, the mornings lonelier. She'd catch herself glancing at his usual booth, half expecting to see him sitting there with that familiar, tired but grateful look in his eyes. But he was gone, and all she had left was the note he'd written, a scrap of paper that now carried more weight than anything else in her life. Still, Emily didn't let herself dwell too much on what might have been. She threw herself into work, saving every penny for her dream bakery. It wasn't easy, balancing long shifts at the diner while caring for her younger brother, but she refused to give up. Every time doubt crept in, she'd pull out Alex's note and read it again. His words reminded her of the kind of person she wanted to be, someone who gave freely, believed fiercely, and never stopped fighting for what mattered most. One crisp winter morning, as Emily wiped down tables before opening the diner, she noticed an envelope tucked under the cash register. At first glance, it looked like any other piece of mail, but something about it caught her attention. There was no return address, only her name scrawled neatly across the front. Curious, she opened it and found a check inside, along with a short letter. The check was for an amount so large it made her heart skip a beat. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the accompanying note. Emily, you've always dreamed of opening your bakery. Let this help turn that dream into reality. You deserve every bit of happiness this world has to offer. Don't try to find me. I'll reach out when the time is right. Her breath hitched as tears welled up in her eyes. Who could have sent this? The handwriting wasn't immediately recognizable, but deep down she suspected it was Alex. Only he would know about her dream bakery. Only he would understand how much it meant to her. Yet part of her hesitated to jump to conclusions. Could it really be him? Or was someone else playing a role in her life she hadn't anticipated? Determined to get answers, Emily began piecing together clues. She remembered Alex mentioning former business partners tracking him down, lawyers working to clear his name. Maybe his fortunes had turned around faster than he expected, and this was his way of repaying her kindness. But why stay anonymous? Why not just come back and tell her face to face? As weeks turned into months, Emily poured her energy into planning her bakery. With the mysterious donation covering most of the startup costs, she was able to secure a small space downtown, paint the walls a warm shade of yellow, and stock the shelves with baking supplies. She named it Sweet Haven, inspired by the cozy atmosphere she hoped to create. Each step brought her closer to fulfilling a lifelong dream, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that Alex was somehow involved. Meanwhile, far from Seabreeze Bay, Alex worked tirelessly to rebuild his life. Clearing his name hadn't been easy. It required countless meetings with lawyers, late nights poring over documents and confronting people who had once called themselves friends. But through it all, one thought kept him going. Emily. He imagined her smiling face whenever doubt clouded his mind, pictured her laughter echoing in his ears during moments of exhaustion. She was his anchor, the reason he pushed forward even when the odds felt insurmountable. When the legal battle finally ended in his favor, Alex regained access to his fortune. Yet instead of returning to the lavish lifestyle he'd once known, he chose a different path. He sold his penthouse apartment, donated a significant portion of his wealth to charitable causes, and moved into a modest home outside the city. For the first time in years, he felt free, not weighed down by expectations or material possessions, but grounded by purpose. But no matter how much he accomplished, Alex couldn't stop thinking about Emily. He replayed their conversations in his mind, remembering the warmth of her voice, the kindness in her eyes. Sending her the check had been his way of giving back, of ensuring she wouldn't have to struggle anymore. Still, guilt gnawed at him. Was it fair to meddle in her life from afar? Shouldn't he have told her the truth instead of hiding behind anonymity? Alex wrestled with these questions daily, torn between wanting to protect Emily and yearning to be part of her world again. Finally, after months of deliberation, he decided it was time to return to Seabreeze Bay, not as the broken man who had stumbled into her diner seeking refuge, but as someone worthy of standing beside her, as an equal, a partner, maybe even something more. On a sunny spring morning nearly a year after Alex had left, Emily stood behind the counter of Sweet Haven, arranging freshly baked pastries in the display case. The bakery smelled of vanilla and cinnamon, and sunlight streamed through the windows, casting golden patterns on the wooden floors. Business was steady, and customers trickled in and out, complimenting her creations and leaving with satisfied smiles. Despite the joy surrounding her, Emily couldn't shake the bittersweet ache in her chest. She missed Alex more than ever, wondering if she'd ever see him again. Just as she finished wiping down the counter, the bell above the door jingled, signaling a new arrival. Expecting another customer, Emily glanced up and froze. Standing in the doorway was a man dressed in a tailored suit, his hair neatly combed, his posture confident yet unassuming. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Then, as their eyes met, realization dawned. "Alex?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He smiled softly, stepping closer. "Hey, Emily." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stared at each other, taking in the changes time had wrought. Alex looked healthier, more put together, but his eyes still held the same vulnerability she remembered. Emily, meanwhile, radiated strength and determination, her presence filling the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Finally, finding her voice, Emily asked the question burning in her mind. "Is this really you? Or am I dreaming?" "It's me," Alex replied, his tone gentle. "I came back to explain everything." She crossed her arms, trying to mask the whirlwind of emotion swirling inside her. "Explain what exactly? Like why you disappeared for a year? Or why some random stranger sent me enough money to open my bakery?" Alex winced, clearly bracing himself for her reaction. "That was me, Emily. I wanted to help you achieve your dream, but I didn't want to complicate things by revealing who I was. I thought staying anonymous would make it easier for both of us." His admission hit her like a punch to the gut. She took a step back, her expression a mix of anger and hurt. "Easier? You think keeping secrets makes things easier? Do you have any idea how confused I've been? How many nights I stayed awake wondering if you were okay or if you'd forgotten about me entirely?" "I'm sorry," Alex said quickly, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I never meant to hurt you, I needed to fix my life before I could come back. And when I heard about your bakery project, I couldn't resist helping. Please believe me, I did it because I care about you." Emily's defenses softened slightly, though skepticism lingered in her gaze. "Care about me? Is that why you vanished without a word? Because that's not exactly caring, Alex." He nodded, accepting her criticism. "You're right, I handled it badly. I should have trusted you enough to share the truth, but I was scared. If you knew who I really was, would you still see me the same way? Would you still want me in your life?" His honesty caught her off guard. Slowly, she lowered her arms, letting them rest at her sides. "Of course I would. Money doesn't change who you are, Alex. What matters is how you treat people, the choices you make, the values you live by. That's what I fell for, not your bank account." Her words struck a chord deep within him. Tears shimmered in his eyes as he stepped closer, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't deserve you, Emily. Not after everything I've done wrong. But if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the man you deserve." The room seemed to hold its breath as Emily studied him, weighing his sincerity against her own feelings. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she offered a tentative smile. "You've got a lot of making up to do, mister, but I think we can work on that. Together." Relief washed over Alex's face as he reached out, gently taking her, hand in his. Thank you, he murmured, for believing in me, for waiting, for being you. And just like that, the distance between them melted away, replaced by a connection stronger than ever before. Though challenges lay ahead, they faced them side by side, two imperfect souls united by love, trust, and the unwavering belief that second chances were worth fighting for. The days following Alex's return to Seabreeze Bay were a whirlwind of emotions for both him and Emily. On one hand, there was an undeniable sense of relief. Finally, they could stop running from the questions that had haunted them for months. But on the other hand, rebuilding their relationship wasn't as simple as flipping a switch. Trust, once broken, even unintentionally, takes time to mend. And though Emily had agreed to give Alex another chance, she made it clear that he would need to earn back her trust fully. For Alex, this meant stepping out of his comfort zone in ways he hadn't anticipated. He didn't just want to be part of Emily's life, he wanted to understand her world completely. That started with spending more time at Sweet Haven. At Ear, first Emily hesitated, unsure how customers might react to seeing a sharply dressed man helping out behind the counter. But Alex insisted, rolling up his sleeves and diving into tasks like stacking trays, wiping tables, and even learning the basics of baking. "Don't laugh," he warned one afternoon as he attempted to frost a batch of cupcakes. "I'm new at this." Emily couldn't help but chuckle as she watched him smear frosting unevenly across the tops of the pastries. "You're doing fine," she teased. "Though maybe stick to cleaning for now. We wouldn't want your first official job to scare people away." Despite his initial clumsiness, Alex proved to be a quick learner. More importantly, he approached every task with genuine enthusiasm, eager to contribute in any way he could. Over time, the bakery became less of Emily's solo project and more of a shared venture, a place where their combined efforts created something greater than either of them could have achieved alone. But it wasn't just about work. As they spent more time together outside the bakery, their conversations grew deeper, touching on topics they'd avoided before. Alex opened up about the legal battles he'd fought to clear his name, the betrayals he'd faced, and the loneliness that had consumed him during those dark months. In turn, Emily shared her own fears about raising her brother, chasing her dreams, and whether she'd ever find someone who truly understood her. One evening after closing up the bakery, they took a walk along the beach. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The sound of waves crashing against the shore provided a soothing backdrop as they strolled side by side. "I've been thinking," Alex said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "About us." Emily glanced at him, curious. "What about us?" He stopped walking, turning to face her. His expression was serious, his eyes searching hers. "I know I messed up, Emily. I know I hurt you by leaving without explaining everything. But I want you to know. I'm not the same person I was when I walked into that diner last year. You changed me. You reminded me of what really matters." Her heart skipped a beat, though she tried to keep her tone light. "Well, I guess I did teach you how to frost cupcakes." Alex laughed softly, but his gaze remained steady. "It's more than that. You showed me kindness when no one else did. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And now, I can't imagine my life without you in it." The sincerity in his voice made it impossible for Emily to look away. For so long she'd carried doubts about whether Alex's feelings for her were real, or if they were tied to gratitude for her generosity. But standing here now, watching the vulnerability in his eyes, she realized the truth. His love for her ran deeper than any debt or obligation. "And what happens next?" she asked quietly. "Are we just going to pretend everything's perfect?" "Because it's not, Alex. Forgiveness takes time." "I know," he replied, nodding. "And I'm willing to wait. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I'll do whatever I need to prove that I'm here for you. Not because of guilt or obligation, but because I love you." The word hung in the air between them, heavy yet beautiful. Emily felt her chest tighten, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. She'd dreamed of hearing those words, but never like this, not in a moment filled with such raw honesty and vulnerability. I love you too, she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. But we've got a lot of work to do. This isn't going to be easy. Alex smiled, reaching out to take her hand. Nothing worth having ever is. As weeks turned into months, Alex and Emily worked tirelessly to build a future together. They tackled challenges head-on, navigating the complexities of blending two vastly different worlds. While Alex had reclaimed his fortune, he chose to live modestly, focusing instead on supporting causes close to his heart, including Emily's bakery. Together, they expanded Sweet Haven, adding outdoor seating and hosting community events that brought the town closer together. Their relationship wasn't without its struggles. There were moments of tension, disagreements over priorities, and lingering insecurities. But through it all, they leaned on each other, choosing communication over silence and understanding over judgment. Slowly but surely, the cracks in their foundation began to heal, replaced by a bond stronger than ever before. One day, as Emily stood in the bakery preparing for a busy afternoon rush, Alex walked in carrying a small potted plant. It was a tiny sprout, barely visible among the soil and leaves. "What's this?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's a symbol," he explained, setting it down on the counter. "Of growth, of starting fresh, just like us." Emily smiled, touched by the gesture. "We're definitely growing," she agreed. "But let's hope we don't need as much watering as this little guy." They laughed together, the sound filling the room with warmth. Though their journey had been far from perfect, they'd found something rare and precious, a love built on trust, resilience, and mutual respect. Little did they know, fate had one final surprise in store, a moment that would solidify their commitment to each other and remind them of why they'd chosen this path in the first place. Months passed, and life in Seabreeze Bay settled into a rhythm that felt almost surreal to Emily. The bakery thrived, becoming a beloved fixture in the community. Locals would stop by for fresh pastries in the morning or linger over cups of coffee in the afternoons, chatting about everything from weather forecasts to neighborhood gossip. It was exactly what Emily had dreamed of, a place where people could gather, connect, and feel at home. And Alex? He fit into her world so seamlessly, it was hard to imagine life without him. He wasn't just helping out at Sweet Haven anymore. He'd become an integral part of its heartbeat. Whether it was organizing charity bake sales, mentoring local kids interested in entrepreneurship, or simply lending a listening ear to customers who needed someone to talk to, Alex poured his energy into making the bakery and the town a better place. His presence brought new life to Seabreeze Bay, but more importantly, it deepened his bond with Emily. Together, they created something extraordinary, a partnership rooted not just in love, but in shared purpose. Still, despite their growing closeness, there remained one lingering question between them. What did the future hold? Neither had spoken about taking their relationship to the next level, though hints of it lingered in quiet moments. A lingering glance across the counter, a hand resting gently on hers as they worked side by side, words left unsaid, yet understood. One crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves danced in the breeze outside, Emily closed up the bakery earlier than usual. Business had been slow that day, giving her and Alex a rare chance to spend time together without interruptions. They decided to take a walk along the beach, the same spot where they'd shared countless conversations since his return. The air smelled of salt and earth, and the horizon glowed with hues of orange and purple as the sun dipped lower toward the water. Emily tucked her hands into the pockets of her sweater, feeling the cool sand shift beneath her boots. Beside her, Alex walked quietly, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket. Something about his demeanor seemed different tonight, calmer yet charged with anticipation. "You okay?" she asked finally, breaking the comfortable silence. "You seem, I don't know, distracted?" Alex chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Not distracted, just thinking." "About what?" He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the waves rolling onto the shore. About us, he admitted after a moment. About how far we've come, and how much farther I want to go. Emily tilted her head, curious. What do you mean? Stopping abruptly, Alex turned to face her. For a moment, he simply looked at her, memorizing the curve of her smile, the way her hair caught the fading light. Then, slowly, he knelt down on one knee, pulling a small, velvet box from his pocket. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded so loudly she swore it echoed against the crashing waves. She stared at him wide-eyed, unable to process what was happening. Emily, Alex began, his voice steady despite the emotion shimmering in his eyes. When I first walked into that diner over a year ago, I didn't expect my life to change. But then you showed me kindness when no one else did. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and now you're the reason I wake up every morning with hope in my heart. Opening the box, he revealed a simple yet elegant ring nestled inside. Its diamonds sparkled faintly in the twilight, catching the last rays of sunlight. I know we've been through a lot, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. And I know trust takes time. But I also know this. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me? Not because of what I have or who I am, but because of who we are together. Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks as she stared at him, the enormity of the moment washing over her. This wasn't just a proposal. It was a promise. A promise to keep building, to keep growing, to keep loving each other through whatever challenges lay ahead. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling. Yes, of course. A wave of relief and joy swept over Alex's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Standing up, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as if afraid she might disappear. Around them the ocean roared, seagulls cried, and the wind carried their laughter into the night. In the weeks that followed, news of their engagement spread quickly through Seabreeze Bay. Friends, neighbors, and regulars at the bakery showered them with congratulations, offering help with wedding plans and sharing stories of how their relationship had inspired others. The couple decided to keep things simple, planning a small ceremony on the beach, the same stretch of sand where Alex had proposed. On the day of the wedding, the weather was perfect. The sky was a brilliant blue, dotted with wisps of white clouds, and the ocean sparkled like glass under the midday sun. Chairs were set up in a semicircle facing the water, decorated with garlands of wildflowers picked from nearby fields. Guests mingled happily, exchanging hugs and reminiscing about how far Emily and Alex had come. As Emily stood at the edge of the beach, wearing a flowing white dress borrowed from a friend, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. Looking out at the crowd, she spotted her younger brother, now taller and more confident than ever, grinning proudly from the front row. Behind him sat the diner's owner, who had given her a job when she needed it most, alongside countless others whose lives had intertwined with hers over the years. When Alex appeared, dressed in a simple suit and tie, Emily's breath hitched. He looked nervous but radiant, his eyes shining with unshed tears as he waited for her to join him. As they stood together before the officiant, surrounded by the people and place they loved, they exchanged vows filled with promises of patience, understanding, and unwavering support. I promise to always see you, not for what you have, but for who you are, Alex said, his voice breaking slightly. To stand by your side, no matter what comes our way. And I promise to remind you every day how much you're loved, Emily replied, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. To be your partner, your rock, and your biggest cheerleader. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, cheers erupted from the crowd. The sound carried across the water, blending with the crash of the waves and the cries of seabirds overhead. It was a moment neither of them would ever forget, a celebration of love, resilience, and second chances. Years later, as Emily and Alex sat together on the porch of their modest home overlooking the bay, they reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Their lives weren't without challenges. There were still tough days, disagreements, and moments of doubt, but they faced them together, leaning on the foundation they'd built. What do you think we'll tell our grandkids someday? Emily asked playfully, leaning her head on Alex's shoulder. He smiled, wrapping an arm around her. We'll tell them about the diner, the bakery, and the stormy night that changed everything. About how sometimes life gives you exactly what you need even when you least expect it. Emily nodded, gazing out at the horizon. And we'll tell them that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other, again and again, no matter what. As the sun dipped below the water, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they sat in contented silence, grateful for the life they'd created together. In the end, it wasn't wealth or status that defined them. It was the connection they'd forged, the dreams they'd pursued, and the unwavering belief that even in the darkest storms, love could light the way. Life after the wedding was a beautiful blend of simplicity and adventure for Emily and Alex. They didn't move into a fancy mansion or buy expensive cars. They stayed in their cozy little home overlooking the bay, with its creaky wooden floors and peeling paint that held countless memories. What mattered most to them wasn't material things but the moments they shared. Lazy mornings sipping coffee on the porch, evenings spent walking along the beach hand in hand, and late-night talks about dreams still waiting to unfold. Their partnership extended beyond their personal lives. Together they continued running Sweet Haven, which had become more than just a bakery. It was a cornerstone of Seabreeze Bay. People came not only for the delicious pastries, but also for the warmth and sense of belonging it offered. Alex often joked that he'd gone from being a millionaire businessman to a glorified dishwasher, but his tone always carried pride. He loved how the bakery brought people together, creating connections among strangers and giving back to the community that had embraced him when he had nothing. Emily, too, found joy in seeing her dream flourish. She introduced new recipes inspired by local ingredients, like honey lavender scones and sea salt caramel brownies, that quickly became customer favorites. Every batch she baked felt like a small victory, proof that hard work and kindness could turn even the wildest dreams into reality. And while the bakery kept them busy, they made sure to carve out time for themselves, knowing that balance was key to keeping their relationship strong. One summer afternoon, as Emily arranged freshly baked cookies in the display case, Alex walked in carrying a rolled-up map. His face lit up with excitement, the kind that made her curious. "What's that?" she asked, wiping flour off her hands. "A surprise," he replied, grinning mischievously. "Close your eyes." She raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. "If this involves cupcakes, I'm going to be very disappointed." "No cupcakes," he assured her. "Just trust me." Reluctantly, she closed her eyes, letting him guide her gently toward the door. The sound of the bell jingling signaled they were stepping outside, and a moment later, she felt the warmth of the sun on her skin. "Okay, open." When she opened her eyes, she saw a vintage camper van parked near the curb, its sides painted with cheerful floral patterns. A sign on the side read, "Seabreeze Adventures." "What is this?" she asked, laughing despite herself. "It's ours," Alex said proudly. "Well, technically rented, but close enough. I thought we could use a break. A road trip, just you and me. No bakery, no phones, no distractions, just us exploring." Emily stared at him, torn between disbelief and delight. "A road trip? In that?" "Why not?" he teased. "It's got charm. Besides, I figured it's time we see more of the world together." Her hesitation melted away as she realized how much thought he'd put into it. This wasn't just a spontaneous idea. It was his way of showing her that life was meant to be lived fully, with room for both roots and wings. "All right," she agreed, finally smiling. "But if we break down in the middle of nowhere, you're fixing it." The road trip turned out to be exactly what they needed, a chance to reconnect without the usual responsibilities weighing them down. They drove through winding mountain roads, explored hidden lakes, and wandered through sleepy towns where everyone greeted them like long-lost friends. Along the way, they collected souvenirs, not trinkets or postcards, but stories. Stories of friendly farmers who invited them to dinner, quirky roadside vendors selling homemade jams, and children who giggled uncontrollably as Alex juggled apples for their entertainment. One evening, as they sat around a campfire under a blanket of stars, Emily leaned her head on Alex's shoulder, feeling utterly content. "You know," she said softly, "I never imagined my life turning out like this." "Like what?" he asked, glancing down at her. "This happy," she admitted. "I used to think happiness was something you worked for, something you earned. But now I realize it's simpler than that. It's about finding someone who makes the ordinary feel extraordinary." Alex smiled, kissing the top of her head. "And you make every day extraordinary for me." Their travels reminded them of how far they'd come, not just geographically, but emotionally. From the stormy night they first met to the quiet strength they'd built together, their journey had been anything but predictable. Yet through it all, they'd learned that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It was about showing up again and again, even when the path ahead was uncertain. When they returned to Seabreeze Bay weeks later, tanned and full of stories, they discovered that the town hadn't stood still during their absence. The bakery had grown busier than ever, thanks to the staff Alex had hired to keep things running smoothly. Customers greeted them with hugs and updates, eager to hear about their adventures. Life resumed its rhythm, but with a renewed energy, a reminder that growth happens not just in leaps but in the quiet spaces between. Months later, as autumn painted the trees in fiery hues, Emily noticed something unusual. Alex seemed unusually restless, pacing back and forth in the living room one evening. When she asked what was wrong, he simply smiled and took her hand. "There's something I want to show you," he said mysteriously. Leading her outside, he stopped in front of a large canvas covered with a sheet. With a dramatic flourish, he pulled it away, revealing a painting of the two of them standing in front of Sweet Haven. The colors were vibrant, capturing the essence of their life together, the laughter, the struggles, the triumphs. "I wanted to create something that would remind us of everything we've built," he explained. "Not just the bakery, but the love and connection behind it." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she studied the painting. It wasn't perfect. Alex wasn't an artist by any means, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the sentiment behind it, a celebration of their journey, imperfect, yet beautiful. As the years passed, Emily and Alex grew older together, their bond deepening with each shared experience. They faced challenges, of course: health, scares, financial hiccups, and the occasional argument, but they tackled them as a team, leaning on the lessons they'd learned along the way. Their story became a legend in Seabreeze Bay, whispered among locals and visitors alike as a testament to the power of kindness, resilience, and second chances. On their 20th anniversary, as they danced under the stars at a party hosted by the entire town, Emily rested her head against Alex's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You know," she murmured, "if someone had told me 20 years ago that I'd end up here, with you, I wouldn't have believed them, and I wouldn't have believed I'd deserve you," Alex replied, holding her close. But here we are. Here they were indeed, two flawed, ordinary people who had created something extraordinary together. Through storms and sunshine, heartbreak, and healing, they had proven that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other again and again until the very last chapter.